Hi everyone, and welcome to the Craig and Jane Show. We've got a very special treat for you tonight. We've got with us tonight a film director who's done a wonderful film about Tibet. And we're going to be talking all about Tibet. We're going to be talking about loads of mystical stuff, all sorts of hidden knowledge, lots of stuff to watch tonight. So, welcome to the Craig and Jane Show. Well, our guest tonight is Jean-Paul Martinez, who's an amazing film producer who's made this film. What was it called? I've forgotten.
You've forgotten already, Craig.
Something about Tibet, wasn't it?
The film is called Never Forget Tibet.
Never Forget Tibet.
So we're going to try to remember it.
We're going to try to remember that today. Okay, so there's your film, Never Forget Tibet. You can see it on a lot of platforms out there. It's you can tell us where you can watch it in a minute, I'm sure. And actually, we saw it, didn't we, Jane? We saw it on the premiere that you did, and I was amazed at some of the stuff you've come up with in this movie, because it's so different in many ways, unique. Really.
Thank you very much, Craig. What did you enjoy about it?
Well, I liked some of the bits, like the bits about never forget Tibet. 7 years in Tibet.
Yeah,
you remember?
Yeah.
I mean, I read the book years ago, and you've got lots of references there, and you've got unique interviews about that I don't think ever been seen before.
And this particular story that we tell in Never Forget Tibet is about how the Dalai Lama escaped from occupied Tibet in 1959 with the help of the US intelligence agencies, the Dalai Lama's own family, a huge operation to sneak the Dalai Lama out, unbeknown to the Chinese who had invaded, and also the Indian officer who led the Dalai Lama to safety, who was called Harmandir Singh, and he was a young man at the time, like the Dalai Lama was. And for those who don't know, China had invaded Tibet, and the Dalai Lama's life was
completely in peril.
It was absolutely in peril, and most likely, if he hadn't escaped during this perilous journey, he would have been captured and killed.
Yeah.
And incredibly, I was introduced to the story a number of years ago, and this was a story that His Holiness the Dalai Lama, one of the great spiritual leaders and huge inspiration to millions of people around the world. This was the first time he had told, in his own words, what had happened during the escape with the Indian political and Secret Service officer Harmandir Singh, who led him to safety. And Harmandir Singh himself was in his mid-90s when he told the story. He'd never told it before either. And so it was just unbelievable that this very important story hadn't been told and recorded on film, because it's a part of world history.
Yes.
And even more than that, it's a part of spiritual world history, which is something that I'm particularly interested in as a spiritual filmmaker. I pretty much gravitate only towards stories of a spiritual nature, also in an ecological nature, because in understanding ideas about spirituality, my film production company is called Compassionate Films, so it's about bringing stories to the world that can hopefully inspire people to live in a more compassionate way, and that is it's a peaceful, non-violent work, but in terms of its messaging. But I think it's one that can hopefully benefit audiences, and I hope people who see the film will want to find out more about what's happened in Tibet in the past. But it's not just a historical story; it's relevant to what's happening today, the world over.
Yeah. I mean, Tibet, really. I mean, I wrote a book on Tibet years ago, and I was going back, and I was absolutely horrified and shocked by the story of Tibet, really. I mean, the Tibet was invaded without any sort of provocation. They shot up a load of fireworks, I remember, to scare them into surrender. The whole non-violence. They could have protected Tibet easily with snipers through Tibet. I'm sure they could have protected Tibet, and they was betrayed. Wasn't there? Was all sorts of stories of being betrayal, and the Dalai Lama got out by the skin of his teeth. And if he hadn't got out, the world would not have known about all the incredible, amazing things that happened, and that great knowledge that Tibet had. It was like it blew all over the world. It's like a dandelion that had been blown, and all the seeds went around the world, and a whole new era of spirituality opened for all of us because of it.
Absolutely.
Well, the world needs that at the moment because the world's in a terrible state. We are so gifted to have His Holiness that in this incarnation we can actually meet him and see him and hear about him.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing thing, and you're right. You know that His Holiness was not he was not known in the West before the escape in the way that he is today, and he's known as the world's most famous refugee monk, but of course he's far more than that. He's far more than that to the Tibetan people and millions of other practicing Tibetan Buddhists around the world who are from the West. But there's a real tragic sort of lining to this story where if the escape hadn't happened, the world might not have benefited from what His Holiness has given to the world in the many ways that he has the hundreds of books he's written or co-written, the many meetings with political, religious, indigenous leaders, social groups. It's taken a number of years to make this film, and pretty much categorically, wherever I go in the world, I always bump into somebody who's got a story to share about having met His Holiness the Dalai Lama and what they sort of learned and were given by that interaction. So from my point of view, I'm not a practicing Buddhist, but I consider it a great and profound privilege to have been able to make this film. And I really wanted it to be a kind of a love letter to him. Yes, it's telling a very, very important and serious story. And Harmandir Singh never wanted this to be recorded. He wasn't interested in any publicity for himself. But at the end of his life, he had decided with his niece, Rani Singh, who's a BBC journalist, and used to be on EastEnders as an actress, but she in conversation with him, he had ultimately agreed to make the film and allow the film to be made on the basis that it was a part of Tibetan history. And when I met him, he said, yes, I'll agree to make this with you and Rani, but there's one condition I have. And I said, of course, Mr. Harmandir Singh Ji. He's Indian, so referred to him as Ji as a term of respect, and he deserves a lot of respect. Sadly, he's passed away now. But he said, look, the Tibetans have been through so much. Please make sure that your film does not cause them any more harm. And I said, of course, that's
really nice.
He said, don't take away balance.
Yes.
I understand the story needs to be balanced, but please make sure that you look after the knowledge of what Tibet has gone through historically and what they're going through today. And so that was really one of my many sort of perspectives as I began to slowly but surely piece this story together.
I think when you meet anybody really holy, like me and Jane have met people like Sai Baba and things like that, it hits you on a very deep and personal level, doesn't it? Although you're kind of told, I know the story's told the story on the surface as well of what happened there and everything like that, but there's a very deep connection. We saw the Dalai Lama before once, and it was Jane and I came out with our heads flying. I mean, our perceptions were all open and everything like this.
Twice, Craig, we've met him.
Yes, twice.
When I first met you, you took me to see the Dalai Lama, and in that time they were searching your handbags because you had weapons in, because his life was in danger. And the second time, we took a granddaughter who's 2 years old to St Paul's Cathedral. We were invited, there the Gurkhas there and everything. And our granddaughter, when she saw him, immediately went like this.
That's amazing.
We knew that there was some Buddhist connection, didn't we, Craig?
Yeah, I think she's got a Buddhist connection. And so from your point of view, I mean, you were really in close proximity to the Dalai Lama, I presume, for quite a lot of time, because I know you've got places you've stayed there all around that area in India where he's based now. How did it affect you on a very deep spiritual, personal level? I mean, what were you really feeling deep down
Yeah.
when you saw him, because I mean it always affects you more than just on the surface, doesn't it?
Yeah,
It's great.
I mean, look, on the surface level, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I'm here with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. But the connection to Tibet had started a number of years before, and I'd had a group of travelling monks who were the Dalai Lama's personal order of monks who had stayed at my house, and I'd worked with them, filming them and organising sacred chanting concerts for them all up and down the UK and Scotland for 2 years, almost consecutively, and that included performances they did at Glastonbury Festival. And so that kind of connection came as a much earlier sort of beginning, and where I'd worked on another film in Colombia with indigenous shamans in Colombia, and as a result of that, I was invited to work with His Holiness's monks, who are well-known monks in their own right. Their chanting has been studied by MIT. It's been studied by NASA. They can create the deepest chants or sounds a human voice can produce. And so I had all sorts of very interesting experiences with them, and that went really well. And then that kind of led on to being introduced to this film and the prospect of making it. But in terms of working with His Holiness directly and considering the material, I would say creatively, kind of holding Harmander's guidance in my heart, and having a strong idea of where I would like the film to go. So it always starts with a series of questions for me. So it was okay, if I'm thinking about this from an audience point of view, what if someone doesn't know who the Dalai Lama is? What if someone hasn't come into contact with spirituality before? What would a younger generation feel about this? Why should they even care that this has happened? So these were all thoughts that were...
And of course it's going to be there after his death, isn't it? Because I mean he's celebrating his... is it his 90th or 89th
birthday was last week,
this year, isn't it? Yeah,
July
so
6th.
I mean, this is going to be a historical document as well. You must feel, because there can't be many more interviews left with the Dalai Lama on this level for the future.
Who knows? That's not for me to say. But the all I can say is it was one of the most profound honours of my life to make this film. And I hope it can educate people. It's already been seen all over the world. It had more cinema screens in the US than any other independently made documentary. Nearly 1,000 cinema screens showed it, and tens of thousands of people came out to show their support and watch it. It's been released theatrically in Australia,
How long
Thailand.
did it take to make?
Overall, 5 years.
Goodness.
5 years
There's a
of
lot
commitment.
Love and energy in that.
Yeah, definitely a lot of love and energy in that. And so,
And it had its problems at the beginning, but it's started to really become sort of get a momentum at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I really go out and watch it, guys, because I mean, we really did enjoy the movie, and I'm not just saying that because JP's with us today, but it is a genuinely interesting story, isn't it? Tibet has something to offer the world that is just so completely unique, isn't it? Really,
absolutely.
I mean, its concept is a combination not just of Buddhism there, but also this amazing other thing like Bon, which is the mystical side of Tibet. There are people like Milarepa, who had all these incredible powers. I had a dream about Milarepa recently. Actually, I'll tell you my dream about last night before we came on here. But incredible things that Tibet knew about. Undiscovered things that we're only just beginning to rediscover at the moment, aren't we?
Absolutely, and I think Tibet is really one of the greatest
ancient religions, really, isn't it? It's like classical.
I would describe it. It's like a storehouse of spiritual knowledge, practice, contemplation, and tools, if you want a modern world, for how to understand human psychology, human spiritual psychology, and to develop someone's inner self. And so I'll give you one example. So And so that leads, of course, to the question of why is Tibet being decimated in the way it has today? Why is a peaceful religion?
I don't think people know
restored?
just how decimated it is, do they? Really?
No,
I mean,
no.
you think about Tibet. I mean, they were torturing the monks and the nuns, and they were using cattle prods on them permanently and things like this. Electronic cattle prods. I remember reading about tying the nuns up and terrible, terrible things. And yet we all go and trade with China. We all think everything's absolutely fine. The Panchen Lama, Panchen Lama was kidnapped and brainwashed.
They've never been seen since the age of 6.
And I bet he'll be out there straight away as soon as the Dalai Lama's passed.
I think the most important thing is, whether it's His Holiness the Dalai Lama, whether it's John Lennon, whether it's Mahatma Gandhi, we have to ask ourselves, why have these spiritual leaders or creative leaders been persecuted for their ahimsa, for their non-violent actions and attitude in the world? And that's something that we are all responsible for. I don't think it's about pointing the finger of blame at anybody. I don't think that gets us anywhere. It's about us all being encouraged to ask difficult questions about why this has happened, and also, probably and possibly more importantly, how we live our own lives. Mm-hmm. And so I always like to come back to this point of His Holiness is probably the best example that we have in the world today of someone who's led a very difficult life. He's lost his country. He's done his best to rebuild, thankfully due to the great support of his now home nation in India. But one day he hopes to return to Tibet. But he's really this example of how you should live your life. Yes, bad things are going to happen to you in your life. We all know that. But how we deal with them is what sets us apart. But I'm not suggesting at all that change isn't needed and policy conditions in parts of the world, China and elsewhere, need to change. I think all of that needs to be looked at.
Well, he's used non-violence, hasn't he? The same as Gandhi did, ahimsa, although that's not the Buddhist term, but it's the same concept. You live by example. He's always lived by example, hasn't he? And I think he's very reflective of what's happening in the world at large, isn't it? It's like a dark shadow has fallen on the world of ignorance, of materialism, where we let go and forget all about what is important in the world, or what is important and why we're here. We forget about our spirituality, and I think he is a shining light, and they still try to pull him down even now, misrepresenting him, I believe, and all the celebrities want to be all around him when the light's shining on it, but they want the kudos of it, but who actually lives it? Who actually lives the principles?
What is his message, Craig? Compassion, love, kindness and unselfishness. If we all went like that in this world, it would be a better place. But unfortunately, a beautiful world, but the wrong people in it at the wrong time.
There's this wonderful expression about that we are, many people in the world today are working towards and for the more beautiful world we all know in our hearts is possible.
Yes.
And I think we are going through huge shifts. It's not even I think, we are. And whether it's your amazing show, and congratulations on your show, it's wonderful, and it's a real honour and privilege to be here. We are all contributing in our own ways, whether it's running your predictions, giving your spiritual readings, whether it's the Nadis, or whether it's making films like I'm doing about spirituality and indigenous knowledge. We are all contributing, and that's really the clarion call, is for everybody to work towards that in whatever way works for them. From my point of view, I will always encourage people to be artistic, follow creative pursuits, and I think that
creativity and spirituality very close together.
Really interesting.
And you had the Nadi done through our site recently too, didn't you?
I did, Craig.
And it mentioned the movie.
Yeah. So before mentioning the movie and the Nadis, which was phenomenal. So the film, I must just say, so the film, it's done its theatrical run around the world so far, and now it's just been launched last week for in honour of His Holiness's 89th birthday, and all that he stands for and all that he's been through in his life. So it's really a testament to him, and I hope as much as a love letter, it's a gift back to him and the Tibetan community, so that the world can understand what they've been through. So the film is now coming out in around about 120 countries on some of the biggest streaming platforms in the world. So please go out and see it and share it with your friends. It's going to be on Apple TV, it's on Amazon, it's on YouTube Movies, Google Play. So if you just Google "Never Forget Tibet," and I will.
What was it called again?
I was just going to say, I was going to remind Craig what the name was again.
Right. You won't forget that, you see. You won't forget.
If we Google "Never Forget Tibet," you'll find all the details for yourself. And then I would also just add that it's not just a normal film. Yes, it's documented a part of a very important part of world history, but it's
an important movie. It's an important movie that's part of the whole spiritual thing that's happening in the world. I mean, the people that follow this channel, you guys out there, you know, we've been talking about the darkness that's fallen on the world and the light that's to come in the future. And I think what it's offering is a glimmer of light in times of darkness, isn't it?
Wow, thank you.
Yeah,
Craig.
and it really is.
I always say it's a film that needs to be watched with the head and the heart. So it's got, you know, a deep level of knowledge about what's happened, but it's also, I believe, and it's been made in a certain way that it's got a transmission of light in there too.
So I had a very strange dream last night about it, just before we came on. Obviously it might be on my mind because I knew I was coming onto the show. But I was dreaming that we were looking for the next incarnation of the Dalai Lama, of where he would be born. And in the dream there was 2 stars in the sky. And I was told that it meant that another person would be born at the same time as the Dalai Lama. And that it would be Milarepa, and that the next Dalai Lama would have miraculous powers, strangely enough. And that we were working out where he would be born by looking at the horoscopes, comparing the time of his death that gave us one direction, and the time of the new birth, which gives us another direction of his birth, original birth, and his death, which show us a direction where the next Dalai Lama would be born. And it was just an amazing feeling, because there was a feeling that this was not, you know, the Dalai Lama is obviously becoming a much older man now. He can't be with us for hundreds of years. But it was the feeling that this was just the beginning of a new rebirth. And also there was the thing in it was also talking about the Chinese trying to hoist upon us the Pancha Lama. That they would be, and that Pancha Lama, I pronounced his name wrong, I know, but he would actually drop all the conditioning that had been told, and he would turn against the Chinese and come out in favour of the original Tibetan way. So it was an absolutely amazing feeling in the dream when I woke up. One of those special energies.
Amazing, wow.
You know, one of those special energies that comes sometimes in a dream. But this is the thing with spirituality, it always finds a way of breaking through, doesn't it? It finds a way. Sometimes a small light can be seen even brighter in a completely dark room. And it's a bit like that, I think, with what Tibet's had to offer, because that is what I see as part of the ancient knowledge Tibet has, because it goes back to Buddhism, but it goes further back to Bon, and it's also connected with the ancient teachings, I think, that were in ancient Himalayan times, which permeated into Hinduism and into Taoism and spread throughout the world. You know, the ancient lost knowledge is still there, and we can't stamp it out.
You mentioned Bon, the Bon religion, and the Bon religion predates Buddhism in Tibet, actually. And there's a wonderful Tibetan Bon teacher called Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, and he says some amazing things in the film. His parents escaped Tibet in 1959. He was born and raised in India, and then became a spiritual teacher later in his life himself in the Tibetan Bon tradition, which is quite a shamanic
Bon
practice.
is absolutely fascinating, actually. I think people that watch the channel would find that very interesting, because most people don't know about Bon. I mean, they go round the temple the opposite way, round the stupas and things, the opposite way to the Tibetan Buddhists.
Right.
They kind of got the left-hand path. It's a bit like the left-hand path in Hinduism, really, and it follows kind of quite a lot of magical teachings, and it really opens our eyes to sort of the spiritual levels of, like, psychic powers, materialization, you know, all these incredible things that we get fascinated by. Became Buddhistized, didn't they, and absorbed into the Buddhism.
Were they into magic?
They're strongly into
Yes,
magic.
very
You know,
magic.
that's why when I dreamed of Milarepa. I mean, Milarepa, apparently, he used to sit on the rocks for so long in meditation that his bum became solid. Solid.
I'll put you on it then. Shall we, Craig?
I said,
You know where you are then.
But he had incredible powers. He had, I mean, there's amazing stories about him alone, and all that's kind of intertwined in this because you've got the Bon element.
It is.
Which I think.
When we interviewed Tenzin on the coast of California in Big Sur, and I wanted to speak to him about Dream Yoga, and he said some spectacular things. And this was in 2019, before the pandemic had even become a global pandemic at that point. And he one of the things he included in his discussion on camera, which made it into the film, he said, "Oh, the reason why we have so many societal problems is due to our disconnection with nature, our disrespect of nature, our damage of nature." And in his Tibetan Bon tradition, they have spiritual practices to give back our human spiritual energy back to the earth to help replenish her. And of course, we have no idea about this in the West unless we have a spiritual teacher or a spiritual practice or some spiritual knowledge. But in terms of society, we have no idea. We haven't even begun to study these things at any form of any level at all. It's still contained within cultures like Tibet or other shamanic cultures around the world as well.
This is
And
the
traditional
lost
culture.
knowledge, isn't it?
It is very much
This is
lost
often
knowledge.
the forbidden knowledge too, because I mean the material age has pushed all these things out. A lot of the traditional religions push out direct experience of things. You know?
But it's beginning to change. You know, the United Nations now have a lot of focus on indigenous knowledge. Academics, universities around the world are beginning to say, actually, maybe we're at the limit of what we know.
Yes.
What can indigenous people teach us? And you only need to sit for 5 minutes with an indigenous person from any different culture to realise there's a huge
Absolutely.
wealth of history, knowledge, healing, science.
Of course, all
We
our
can
knowledge
benefit from.
nowadays is total rational knowledge. AI is the
Yeah.
ultimate form of it,
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
isn't it? Artificial intelligence is pure rational knowledge. But what things like Tibet teach, and all the mystical teachings, and all the other places you've been to with shamans and things like that, what they teach us is direct experience
Yeah.
of knowledge. Knowledge that is Shruti, as they call it in Hinduism, a knowledge that is given, that almost just falls from the air, complete. Because we are, and this is what intuition is and what psychic powers are, knowledge that just comes from somewhere else that I've not even had to think about. It just comes from
Would
nothing.
you say it's a different reality state than Craig? Or consciousness,
Well,
knowledge?
this is another form of our reality that we're
Yes,
forgetting.
yeah.
And I think this is something that is very, when you look at Tibetan teachings, although it takes you to the Buddhist way, it also has another layer to it that is perhaps a little bit deeper even than the traditional Buddhism, I feel, because it you know, Buddhism can be very cerebral. I think it can,
Yeah,
you know,
it's the mind is a big
it's
part
all
of it.
about it gets a bit carried. I think that's why for me Buddhism, when it says things, the self is empty of. The nature of the self is empty
It's the void.
of inherent existence,
Yeah.
right? So there's nothingness. So
Yeah.
we're all nothing. But then you think of that doesn't apply to my direct experience of things. There's something else. So there's this other level of what I almost think of Jungian sort of unconscious forces that seem to also be intertwined in the mysterious qualities
And I
that
think
comes out of Tibet.
And I think this is what great artists like Leonardo da Vinci were absolutely interested in. I think when he was drawing pictures of the
Yes.
human anatomy with trigonometry and measurements all depicted very precisely and clearly.
Yes.
I think he was trying to say we are all divine through our body and mind and complete self. We were able or are able to do exactly what you're talking about, whether you call it psychic knowledge, whether you call it intuition, whether you call it synchronicity. I think there's a greater reality we're able to tap into
Yes.
that can lead us in a direction that perhaps we're meant to explore further. And for me, that's creativity.
And this is where we must get the rebirth of what we would perhaps call magic. You know, I mean, I know you're working on another movie as well, aren't you, about Merlin and things like this. So this is kind of a new tact on it, isn't it, really? Because I think what appeals to me about Tibet is its mystery, its magic, all the things that Alexander David O'Neill, I think her name was, who was incredible things like tulpas and magical beings and things like this. And yet also, here in the West, those same ideas have become sort of pushed back into the mud, as it were, that need to sort of be reborn again. So this is going to be happening, I think, with the Merlin story too?
It will be happening with the Merlin story, and I think it's so incredibly Dr. Deepak Chopra, who you interviewed, Craig, he came over because he's a long time sort of friend and supporter of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and as His Holiness couldn't travel, Dr. Chopra came over and helped launch.
And he stuck with him too. That's the good thing.
And he helped launch the film in the UK, and then that led us to working together more. And he came and opened Glastonbury Festival with a meditation for peace. And while we were in the process of going to the festival, he said, "Oh, you know, I used to live in Glastonbury." I said, "Really, Deepak? I never knew that." And he said, "Oh, if you read my book on Merlin, maybe we should make that into a film." And I said, "We'd love to." And so we're in the process I'm writing the script with him. We've written the treatment, and it's a wonderful story about Merlin and King Arthur, who interestingly Joseph Campbell, who inspired George, you know, who's the great mythologian Joseph Campbell, who inspired George Lucas and the Star Wars movies, and Joseph was very, very interested into this the legacy of King Arthur and Merlin and the Grail, and this idea of how come out of all the stories in history has this story about Merlin and King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table just been one of the few that has actually endured in our Western culture over time. So I think we come full circle back to this idea of forgetting, and never forget Tibet, that's the title. But I think we're in a cycle of forgetfulness at the moment, where we've forgotten so many things, or we're forgetting even more.
Of course, here in Winchester, this is used to be considered as being Camelot.
Okay.
You know, we've got a false round table. You know, as well.
There's a few places that lay claim to that.
You're going to be using AI for all this new movie too, aren't you? A lot of it as well. This is going to make it quite interesting to see that ancient world being brought alive by new tech.
Definitely, I've done some work on that already. But the essence of the story is it's a reincarnation story. So in Dr. Chopra's book, Camelot has fallen in ancient times. That's led to this age of forgetfulness in the world, which you could say that we're living through now.
Yes.
Merlin has put himself to sleep and he's in prison and under the spell of the evil wizard Mordred, and he sends helpers into the future to find the reincarnation of Arthur, Lady Guinevere, who's Katie in his story, and to help them reawake to their divine destiny.
So it's a bit never forget Avalon.
Yeah, it kind of is. It kind of is. And then they travel back in time to help rescue Camelot in order to save ancient and modern world, the modern world at the same time. So it's a fascinating story. We're having a lot of fun with that. And but the film industry is going through this absolute, as you rightly say, Craig, this revolution in terms of film production, where you're now able to make things in the virtual world.
I know you're right on the cutting edge of it, because you've talked to me about some of this, and that's
amazing.
You know
the name Avalon, don't you, Craig? Because Danielle's middle name's Avalon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Mysteries.
Yeah, okay. Since the new Star Wars Mandalorian film or series was made, that really kind of changed the industry and what's possible in filmmaking. So we're at the cusp now of it's the same milestone as when silent movies became movies with sound, and then movies went from black and white into colour. We're going through that revolution, but in an unprecedented way, where we can make digital environments, bring outside environments into the digital world, and really go with the imagination in an unlimited way, which poses really interesting challenges for me, because I'm always trying to bring people closer to nature. So I have a sort of slight reluctance to go, actually, is this going to take us further away from nature? But then you just come back to this question of, actually, how can this be used to inspire people to come back closer to nature anyway?
That's what's needed.
Subtlety's needed with that, I think, isn't it? With that type, all that new technology.
There's two really prominent ideas that are present in the spiritual movement of the world today. One is this idea of young people being able to be encouraged and inspired and make change. That's one part. And then there's this other part which has probably been spoken about for longer, which is really emerging in a strong way now, I think. And that is the role of the divine feminine principles and ideas to help heal the world.
Divine Mother, like Mother Earth. I think it's very important we have this, because if all the women got together and with love, because love's the highest thing that we have here, it would change the world, because at the moment it's got so materialistic and it's got awful people stabbing, killing one another, that we want to change that. And how can we change it? On a high vibration of love, and it's coming from a divine source. That's what I believe. So we need to open our hearts and open our minds with love and change things. But it doesn't mean us women are a walkover. I always say to my girls, think like a man, be a woman, but think like a man, and that way you'll get on in life. But be a tigress and be fearless, but be kind. Don't be selfish. If you saw a homeless person in the street, even if you gave them a cup of coffee or a sandwich, it means that somebody cares about them, because we don't know how that suffering that person's been through. They could have been sexually abused, drug addict. It doesn't matter, as long as they know for that moment that somebody loves them. And it's the same like women go through. You men are very lucky to have us women in the universe, because women are behind, I believe, well, most women are there sort of nurturers, nurturing the children, nurturing animals, nurturing men. So, you know, the whole planet at the moment does need our high spirituality, and I'm a great believer spirituality in my life is most important. My best life has been with spiritual people like yourself, like with Cranes. We can change this by being good people, good values, and also I have a very strong belief in God, as you know, which is so important to me, and Christ. And all that reason we're here is love. And I want to thank you so much for I've seen the film, and it really touched my heart. And I was very blessed to see that, and it made me cry inside, because it was so beautiful, and you've got this holiness that, you know, is coming with love, helping others. And I've actually seen a film where these priests were set on fire, and they still had forgiveness in their hearts. And you know, it's very sad, but what I like about His Holiness, he has a great sense of humour.
That was the mark of a spiritual person, I think, if they've got that humorous element to them.
Yeah, and he's very giving, and he thinks of the poor and the unprivileged people, and to me, he's a very special man. And it makes you wonder, God has chosen these special people to help the world. So we need young people to change the world. So we need really good spirituality and good people, and that's where you all can play a part.
I think, well, again, what people like you are doing, JP, is helping the world to find its way to healing. Because ultimately, what we're doing, we've lost our spirituality. We've lost our sense of meaning. We've lost our sense of purpose. We've lost our sense of why we're here, where we're going, all the basic things. And like you talked about nature and things like that, we've lost our connection with nature and things. And all of this is really taking us to a form of trying to heal the world. And I know that a lot of the themes of what you're doing is healing is coming, isn't it? Healing is coming to us all.
Definitely, that is the big message, and I think the global zeitgeist, people who argue that the current theme and trend of the world is one thing, but for me, I think whichever direction you look in the world today, either in ourselves, in our families, in our communities, and in the world as a whole, it is healing that's required. So then we have to ask how that can happen, and I think we all here agree that it's through spiritual knowledge.
I think
and
it's
spiritual
spirituality. We
yeah.
can manifest the negative, but equally we can manifest the healing to clear that negative. And I think ultimately that's what we all do, whether it be in the creative industries, whether it be in the spiritual type of industries. It's all much the same, really.
Yeah.
It's all about making the world a better place.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, everyone, thank you for joining the show tonight. I think it's been a fascinating discussion, and I'd like to thank you, John Paul, for coming on the show and talking about.
Yes, definitely.
Never forget Tibet.
Thank you.
Don't forget Craig.
Never forget Tibet.
And for those of you that are patrons, I'll be putting up a little bit of behind the scenes stuff, and those that are on the YouTube channel, the other YouTube channel, as it were, the pay-for YouTube channel, you can also see a few little behind the scenes that we did before making this show. So anyway, thanks again for joining us, and we're all going to say
Bye.
Bye.
The situation is very difficult. The Chinese forces are already reaching. Now time come, leave.
It was one of the most daring escapes in history. Fighting breaks out and forces the Dalai Lama to escape the invading Chinese.
Exactly 10 o'clock, I left from Dublin.
I had a hunch that I'm going on an important mission. My job was to go and receive him, ensure his safety, and bring him back to the plains of India safely.
Real danger is there. Danger on our life.
This is the story of what happened, told through the first-hand accounts of the Dalai Lama and Harmandir Singh.
This is the last photograph of the Dalai Lama taken in the Free Tibet.
In order to practice love, you also need practice of tolerance.
What we lack in this world is a little bit of compassion, a little bit of kindness.
With the challenges we all collectively face today, young leaders are rising up with strength, courage, and conviction, making meaningful changes and impacting the world.
Sisters and brothers, I really appreciate so many people.
The Dalai Lama is calling for more young people everywhere to rise up and to lead a new generation and to create a compassionate worldwide revolution based on love.
Anything that we do, particularly political moves, which affect so many lives, if it's not governed by some kind of an ethical value, then we have become like animals.